sorry for before, we're just trying to test this out. We'd like to welcome you. Thank you all for being here, and we are going to get started. So before we begin, I would like to let you know who has organized this and how we have come together tonight. The Junior League of Women Voters, the American Association of University Women, and the League of Women Voters. Each of these organizations on the whole and locally, such as the neighboring towns, have been focusing on human trafficking, what the signs are and what we as concerned citizens can do with the ultimate goal of advocacy and possibly saving one victim, which would be total success if we could do that. So I'd like to thank Marlene and Leslie for helping to put this together, Rector Matthew here at the church, and we will begin with this distinguished panel that we have here of our speakers. And my name is Elizabeth Santaramo. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of the Montclair area. I am also a member of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and I am currently one of two co-chairs for the SOAP initiative in preparation of the Super Bowl next February. So our first speaker is Max Meyer, and I will read a little bit of his bio. Max is the Associate Director of ECPAT USA and is in charge of youth outreach and public awareness. He directly runs the ECPAT USA New York City Youth Committee, which raises awareness of child sex trafficking among local high school students and teaches them tools every activist needs to combat this injustice. He has spoken to numerous local area colleges, high schools, and community groups, increasing the visibility of a sorely overlooked and vulnerable demographic of Americans. He also provides tactical advice and support to other youth groups and abolitionists across the country through the ECPAT USA website. He is a graduate of Rochester Institute of Technology. He has a degree in anthropology, sociology, and modern history with a minor in political science. And the way that we will have this forum tonight is I will ask you please to make a mental note, or if you have a piece of paper, if you can jot down your questions, because we will have a question and answer period at the very end of tonight's forum. So I leave you with Max.
No, that's not mine. No, that is not mine.
Oh, so then I turn in the right.
Okay. Thank you for coming. My name is Max. I work for ECPAT USA. And you have a good idea of why you're here tonight, I think. I'm just curious, and just give me some head nods, yes or no. Are you really familiar with the issue of human trafficking, or is this something that you're hearing about for the first time? Okay. Well, I just want you to take a moment to think of the image that comes to mind when you hear the term human trafficking victim. And imagine, the clothes, the location, who this person is. And once you have that image, I want you now to think about what a child prostitute looks like, or better yet, a teenage prostitute. I'm talking about, a kid on the street that when you're walking maybe in the city and you look the other way and you pretend that you don't see him, or you cross the street, or you just don't want to be near that person. Because that's the real face of the human trafficking that at least the ECPAT USA deals with. It's something that's very difficult for people to understand, because when they hear human trafficking, they expect to see a prisoner, someone who's chained to a bed, especially when we're talking about sex trafficking. They expect to see a doe-eyed, innocent-looking kid who's just yearning to be rescued. And very often that's not the case. Because, yeah, that's what they may look like at the beginning of the story, but when you find them, that's in the middle of their lives. And so the victim that you find is someone who doesn't want your help, who, if you offer assistance, is going to spit in your face. And the reason why is because traffickers use very sophisticated methods to recruit and retain their victims. Now, I'm talking about American kids right now. I'll get into foreign-born kids in a little bit, but I just want you to understand that these are kids who maybe poverty is a factor, but these are kids who are coming from homes with alcohol abuse, some other substance abuse, family mental illness, divorced parents. And yeah, like I said, poverty is a factor, but these are things that could happen really to middle class and even upper class kids, and they do. And it's because these kids grow up in an environment where they can't trust the adults in their lives, and so they'll seek elsewhere. A very common way that the traffickers find these kids is online, because so many kids today use Facebook or MySpace or any other social media, and they post their entire lives out into the world. And so traffickers are able to search those pages and pick up on the cues of someone who's in need of validation, who's in need of affection and support, a father figure, a first boyfriend, a first love. And they target them, and they go after 10, 20 girls at a time, and 9, 19 reject them. They don't care, because it's just that one kid who's receptive that they need. And they'll act like a loving boyfriend, and they'll act like someone who cares. And they'll be that role model, that mentor, that maybe that missing father figure in their life. And then they'll normalize prostitution to them. And what they'll do is they'll hang out with their friends where all the guys are pimps, all the girls are prostitutes. And they'll say, see, this is just a life choice. We have fun, we stay up late, we drink, we do whatever we want. Now, the kid doesn't really want to do this, but because the trafficker has been buying her gifts, taking her out to dinner, he makes her feel like she owes him. He uses coercive tactics. He plays mind games to convince her to do it. And it's something that's very hard to imagine, being in that position. I mean, we're all here fairly far removed from being a teenager and remembering what it's like, the insecurities, the uncertainties about the changes that your body's going through. Just high school's difficult enough, and when you have the extra factors of problems at home, that really makes you want to look outside. And that's what the traffickers know. And they're constantly changing their tactics to keep up with the times. And so what'll happen is he'll convince her to try it just once. If she's been sexually abused, then he'll say that, she's damaged goods, no guy will ever want her anyway. So, since he's the only guy that cares about her, he should listen to her. He feeds this stuff into her and convinces her that she's been abused all of her life and that this is a way that she can regain control over her life. Or if she's never had, sex before, then he'll be the first, and then he'll be like, do it for me. We're connected. You got to trust me. And for a young girl, for her first love, she doesn't have the perspective to know what he's asking for is too much. And she'll try it, she'll regret it, but now she's locked in. And like I said, it's difficult to imagine this happening. You want to blame the victim, but a couple of boys from Harlem videotaped themselves recruiting and grooming girls to turn them out into prostitutes. And these were just normal girls, and these guys actually were driving up along the side of the street, looking at girls walking and being like, hey, good looking. Most of the girls rejected them, but the one that responded was the one that they pursued. And then what these boys did was that after they filmed themselves, they sent that tape into MTV, hoping to get a reality TV show about their lives as pimps. MTV passed on the videotape to the FBI and ended up serving, I think, a 10-year and a 20-year sentence. And so what I'm trying to explain to you is that whatever concept you have about human trafficking, it's a much broader issue. And so once these girls, do it for the first time, that's when the real, violence begins. Because The trafficker will use verbal abuse and he'll use physical abuse, developing a codependency relationship, no different than domestic violence, where he gets her to internalize the violence that he commits upon her, to internalize the abuse, to internalize the assault, where he loves me, if only I make more money, he'll stop beating me. He loves me, I shouldn't have been talking while he was on the phone. All these things, she thinks it's her fault and that by doing something to please him, she can improve her condition. And she doesn't get to keep the money that she makes. She hands it over to him. He'll tell her that it's your money, I'm just protecting it for you. You come to me when you want something, and I'll determine if it's worth buying. Like paying for her cell phone, paying for her rent, paying for her food. She ends up thanking him for giving her gifts with her own money. And so that's why this is such a complex issue that can't simply be resolved overnight. When these girls get picked up by law enforcement, they are completely antagonistic to the process because they have been raised not to trust the police. They are told that the police will try and trick you. The police will try and get you to admit what you've done to give you a harsher sentence. Just keep your mouth shut, use a fake ID saying you're over 18, and you'll spend a night in jail, I'll pay the fine, don't worry, but just keep your mouth shut. And he has spent months, if not years, not just establishing trust, but also establishing fear, where she is afraid of him, and so she's going to do what he says. And oftentimes, what he says about police is right, and part of the problem there is that there's a lack of services, that a lot of cops want to be able to do something to help these kids. They see what's going on, but they don't have a shelter to bring them to. Or if there is a shelter, it might be a closed-door facility. And there are open-door facilities, and what that means is that the kids can leave whenever they want. And that's very important, because that's part of trust that has to be reestablished. Because you can't just take them out of that situation one night and expect it all to be over. These girls want to go back to their traffickers. They're afraid not to. And so what you have to do is you have an open-door facility, and you'll hear the success stories about the girl who stayed one night because the court said she had to, and then she left in the morning. And then a few months later, she comes back, maybe because of a court order, maybe because her trafficker beat her too much, and she'll stay 2 nights, and then she'll go back. And then a couple months later, she'll come and she'll stay for a week, and then she'll leave, and then she'll come back. And it's this process that can take months, if not years, of establishing trust that the door will always be open, there will always be a bed for you. We're not going to force you to do anything, we're just here to help you. And that's the thing, is that a lot of these kids are already in the social welfare system. A lot of them are foster kids, and so they don't necessarily have a warm and welcome home to go back to. They go back to their trafficker. And so that's why you need to have an open-door facility to reestablish, to regain that trust in society and other adults, because these kids for so long, the only person that they can trust, the only person who's followed through on the threats as well as the promises has been the trafficker. And so you also have the issue of kids being trafficked into the country, and you also have Americans traveling overseas and exploiting kids there. And I just want to be clear that most of what ECPAT USA does is we deal with teenagers. And the reason why that is because almost everyone can agree when it's a prepubescent child that that kid is a victim. That, if it's a 10-year-old, maybe a 12-year-old, everyone says, okay, this kid is clearly a victim. They are being prostituted. They are not a prostitute. But something happens, both from a law enforcement point of view as well as from a societal point of view. A lot of times with girls, it's when they grow breasts, when they sexually develop, that people view them to have the agency, that they're no longer a prostituted child, they're now a prostitute. And so we have to try and reform our thinking and that conception, because it is just wrong. And you can arbitrarily say, well, maybe a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old is particularly smart or savvy, that, give them a slide, but the whole thing is the law has to draw certain lines, and the line that we agree on is 18, because that's the age of majority. And so we deal with kids under the age of 17. And so when you have kids trafficked into the country, or you have Americans traveling overseas, very often the story is the same. It's just a matter of the destination that changes. That you have kids who are growing up in countries of extreme poverty, like absolutely soul-crushing desperation. Maybe a tsunami or an earthquake hits, devastating the countryside and just absolutely destroying the economy. And people lose their homes, they lose their livelihood, they lose access to food and clean water. And so what happens is traffickers will come and they'll say, I'm here to help. I'll take your kids to safety. Maybe they're saying, I'll take them to the other side of the island, or I'm taking them to the other side of the country, another part of the region. And they'll say, your kid will be in a shelter, or maybe your kid will go to school. Maybe your kid will be working as a domestic servant, or even, in a sweatshop. They might even promise that, because then the idea is that they can send money home to the family to help them. And that when things get back on their feet, when the area is rebuilt, when the family has work again, they'll be sent back. But that's not what happens. That these traffickers use fraud to convince kids, and it doesn't even require a natural disaster. Sometimes starvation and living on that knife edge is a way of everyday life. And one less mouth to feed can make the difference for the other kids. And so these parents will trust people in their own community who say, I have contacts. Over 40% of trafficking victims knew their trafficker when we're talking about worldwide trafficking. That these are people who they trusted, who made money off of selling them. That in the 1850s, a prime field hand slave would be sold for about $1,500, which in today's dollars is like $40,000. And in 2013, people are bought and sold for less than $100. That there's so many people, life has become so cheap, and in a lot of areas, food and water scarce, work scarce, that parents have no choice but to find ways to unburden themselves. And it sounds terrible. And there's a lot of great aid work doing to address this issue, but as of today, a lot of families see it as a way to help their kids, because they honestly believe, or they want to believe very strongly, that this kid who's being taken by the trafficker will be helped, that they'll get a good job, they'll get a good chance. And so when these kids get taken, a lot of times, of course, they want to run away, they want to escape. And so what the traffickers will do is they'll beat them, they'll rape them, and then in a lot of communities that makes them damaged goods. If they're a girl, then you can't get married if you're not a virgin, or being a prostitute. I mean, in America, being a prostitute, having been a prostitute, having been a worker in a strip club, is something that people look down upon. And it's magnified so much worse over there that a lot of these girls feel like they can't go home again, not without bringing shame to themselves and their family. And then also, if they have siblings, traffickers can threaten by saying, if you run away, because we're a criminal network, we can reach out and have someone drive up to your family's house, kill your parents, take your younger sister. And that's all before you can reach a payphone. And so a lot of the kids who are trapped in that trafficking situation really stay out of the fear, as well as the belief that they're helping their family, that they're protecting them. And so some of these kids will be trafficked within their own country. Some of them will come into America. A lot of people, the immigration debate rages on as always, and a lot of people are willing to trust smugglers to get them across the southern border. And some of these smugglers will let them go, collect their fee, and that's the end of it. Some of them will promise to smuggle them in, but once they're here, they'll take away their documents, they'll take them to a workhouse, a brothel, whatever, and they'll say, you owe us money, you got to work off that debt. It cost more to bring you here, there was more danger, there was more legwork, that sort of stuff. And so these people, these kids get trapped in a bad situation. It's made only worse because if you're a foreigner and you don't know the language, it's very easy to be lied to about what would happen if you got caught by police. A lot of these kids are coming from countries where police officers are corrupt or there is no law enforcement to speak of, and so they really don't know that police are there to help them, and so they live in fear of being caught. And so they comply with the traffickers because the consequences of not complying are perceived so much worse. And a lot of people wonder, what could lead a person to sexually exploit a child? And the answer there is, our society, we're very much youth obsessed. We like people that look young and healthy, and very often, that's the case of teenagers, where they're in that prime age of, attraction, but also innocence. And a lot of people like the idea. A lot of the people who go to a prostitute like the idea of feeling like they're big, powerful man. And also, when you have the issue of sex tourism, of men traveling overseas to have sex with children, you have a lot of other factors as well. There's anonymity, that they feel like no one knows me around here. This will never get back home. I can do stuff here that I couldn't do back home. You also have the feeling of helping them, of rationalization, that these are poor kids. I'm giving them money, that this will help them. You have the belief that because they're younger looking, they're probably not infected with STDs. And that seems far-fetched because, if you're going to a prostitute, of course, you're not going to be the first one. But that's part of the illusion that these men tell themselves. They don't like to think about the other men who are with this kid. They like to think that this kid is just for them. And you have a lot of other factors like peer pressure. People are traveling in a group and some people want to go and have sex with prostitutes. They can cajole others to do. And there's many more reasons. But the whole thing is, it comes down to the fact that a lot of people view prostitution as a victimless crime. That the girl wants to do it, she enjoys doing it, why not? And the answer there is that ECPAT USA, we have no official position on adult prostitution. Certainly there's two good arguments, or arguments on either side that are equally valid about that. But we can all agree that a child isn't capable of making that choice, not yet. We don't let kids drink, we don't let them smoke, we don't let them vote. We shouldn't let them be prostitutes either. And that's really where ECPAT USA comes in. And we try and educate communities about this issue. We try and get the private sector involved. We have a code of conduct that hotels and travel and tourism companies sign to make sure that their facilities are not utilized by child sex traffickers. We look to change government policies. On the federal level, human trafficking, modern-day slavery is a crime. But that only comes into play when it's the FBI or other federal agency investigating. We have to change state laws, and very recently, this past year, New Jersey passed what we term a safe harbor law, a law that seeks to protect children. Because in a lot of states, the prostitution laws exist side by side with the statutory rape laws. And what that means is that if a 14-year-old has sex with a 30-year-old, the 30-year-old goes to jail. But if that 30-year-old pays money for the sex, then it's likely that they'll both go to jail. And that's where the safe harbor laws come in. And they're about protecting kids, about diverting people who are at risk in the foster care system for more services. They're about getting kids treatment, about getting shelters that can help these kids. And there's so much more that needs to be done. And I only have 15 minutes and short time, but I'm trying to express to you that this is a very grave and serious issue. And it's not something that is easily solved. This is a matter of solving poverty, because you can't just take these victims out of the brothel, out of wherever they may be, and expect them to just get better. It takes years of rehabilitation, A lot of these kids are high school dropouts or have no job training or job skills. That for years, a balanced diet to them was McDonald's and Pepsi. And so there's so much work that has to be done to get them to become, mature, functional, productive members of society. And without help from, the legislature, without help from law enforcement, without help from the community being willing to fund this stuff, these kids are just going to end up back with their trafficker. Because if they don't have a viable way to support themselves, then everything the trafficker said turns out to be right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Max. That was excellent. And I wanted to let you know that what you are hearing and what you will continue to hear on a state level, national level, international level, it is and can be very overwhelming. For those of you who are not that familiar with human trafficking, if you feel yourself being overwhelmed by what you're hearing and how sad it is and how heartbreaking, feel free to just, take a few deep breaths, let it process, and as the evening progresses, it'll become a little bit lighter with what Patricia will share, with what Sister Mary Pat will share, because the good news is coming, and with what Dave will share. So the good news, we're making our way to what we're doing here in New Jersey and how you can become a part of it and feel proud of our efforts. So our next speaker is Kate Lee, someone whom, I admire everybody here, but we are inspired and motivated by, so I am anyhow. Kate is also a member of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking. She is also the co-chair of the Governor's Advocacy Council Against Sexual Violence and a member of the Junior Leagues of New Jersey's State Public Affairs Committee. It was through this committee, which is known as SPAC, that she first started working on the issue of human trafficking in 2006. She organized SPAC's 2009 conference at Keene University, which was then titled Human Trafficking in New Jersey, Hiding in Plain Sight, which was the first conference to address the issue exclusively in New Jersey. She organized a follow-up legislative workshop in 2010, also at Keene, which developed the nucleus for the New Jersey legislation, which just passed this year. She was the state chair of SPAC from 2009 to 2011. She is the immediate past president of the Junior League of the Oranges and Short Hills, serving from last year to this year, and taking the nonprofit organization of women into its centennial year. She is also the treasurer of the Junior Leagues of New Jersey State Council. Kate was born in London and attended the University of Warwick, gaining a Bachelor of Arts in Politics. She was a BBC News and current affairs producer in London from 1989 to 1996, working primarily on daily radio programs. During her time at the BBC, she traveled on assignment to Hong Kong, Manila, Israel, Germany, and France, as well as to many outside locations in the UK. After leaving the BBC to move to Tokyo with her husband, she worked as a newsreader and rewriter for NHK World for 2 years. Japan was followed by the move to the US in 1998, where Kate has spent her time as a volunteer while raising her family. She became the president of the Millburn Short Hills Newcomers Club in 2000, when she also joined the Junior League, becoming community vice president in 2003 to 2004, and served on the board of trustees at Farbrook School in Short Hills from 2006 to 2012. She currently lives in Short Hills with her husband and 3 sons, which I'm sure she's raising them to become very responsible young men. I leave you with Kate.
Jimmy will show me how to do this. I'll need you soon, Jimmy, I think. But maybe I've got this. All right. Can you hear me? Okay, how's that? Good? Well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And I'm here primarily to talk about the Junior League's role in the issue of human trafficking and the sort of story of that legislation that Elizabeth kindly mentioned. But I just wanted to sort of show of hands, who here is a member of one of the volunteer organisations that has been putting together tonight's event? If you're AAUW, League of Women Voters, Junior League, right. So my story is like the stories of your organisations. Each organisation has had an amazing journey. And, you know, you might be thinking, gosh, why have I never really heard of human trafficking? Because I think a few of you said it was something fairly unfamiliar. And you think, gosh, it's obviously been going on a long time. Why is it so fresh to me? And the reason is it's a new crime, effectively. It's only been defined in federal law since 2000 and in state law since 2004, 2005. And it was soon after that that the Junior League and the State Public Affairs Committee, which is, in fact, the grouping together of the 8 junior leagues. I don't know if you know that there's one next door, Junior League of Summit. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. But there are 7 other leagues in the state of New Jersey. Mine is just in Melbourne. There's one in Montclair that Patricia will talk about later, and she's a member of that, but there are others around the state. And we get together at a state level to create legislation and make sure legislation is passed. So we got involved soon after the state legislation that mirrored the initial TVPA, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, federally was passed, which was mostly focused on international victims, foreign people coming to the US, what could be done to ensure that they could get some sort of visa help and so on and be looked after and get law enforcement protection and so on and so forth. So that all happened in the early part of the 2000s, and I got involved then, and I went to my first conference in 2006 at Rider University, and I was overwhelmed with it. But I also realized soon after that we wanted to sort of carry on and see what we could do, that there's another thread here, that sometimes our volunteer organizations can be more effective than some non-profit groups, some funded non-profit groups, that are getting grants to do their work, or even state agencies. So my first experience of that was that lots of great work in this conference had been put together because there were grants that were given out shortly after the state passed its legislation. One was to the International Institute of New Jersey. They were the ones that funded some work and this conference. And then shortly after that, in 2006, the grant money ran out. And so they were out of the picture. And it was left, and some coalitions that had been forming in the north of Jersey. There was one in the south that stayed vibrant, thank goodness. But other coalitions fell apart because the funding dried up for the organizations that were trying to sort of spearhead it. So that's why I felt, wow, the Junior League, no one's paying us and no one's taking any money away because we never had any money to start with. So we're just going to keep on doing this and figure out what the next step is. And at this point, I want to show you a video, because what inspired that conference in 2009 was a case that was broken here in New Jersey, and it wasn't about sex trafficking, it was actually about labor trafficking. But if you're going to give me a second, Jimmy and I were going to just make sure we can watch this. It's a CNN report made in 2010 about a case that was happening in 2002 to 7. So for 5 years, this was going on, and you'll get the whole story right now. Sorry guys, 1 second. Someone want to stand in front of the screen so you can't see me making a mess of this. Okay, you think we can hear it now? If I play? No. Alright. 1 second, sorry.
girls were victims of something hard to believe, something you might never expect, something that happened in plain sight. You are looking at girls who were held as slaves in America, not for a week or a month, but for years.
Can you tell us about what it was like having someone else control all of your movements, everything you did?
It was like being, being trapped, being in a cage. It's horrible. Like sometimes it's not enough food for us to eat, no freedom at all.
Nicole and Zena and another 20 girls like them were brought to the U.S. from their homes in the West African nations of Ghana and Togo nearly a decade ago. Barely teens, promised an American education. They were instead enslaved in Newark, New Jersey.
What did the traffickers take from you?
They took my childhood from me, my teenhood. They took it from me. They took my trust from me, and they took everything. They took everything away from me.
The girls were forced to work in hair braiding salons, serving customers all day, right out in the open. Their captors took all the money the girls earned, every penny.
How many days a week were you working?
7 days a week.
How many hours a day?
Sometimes 14 hours.
This went on for 5 to 6 years. Traffickers held the girls in several houses in Newark and East Orange. The traffickers no longer lived there.
This is the neighborhood where these girls were being held, and just look at it. Manicured lawns, nice houses. It looks like any neighborhood in America, and it definitely doesn't look like a place where you'd expect to find slavery.
Who would commit such a crime? These are the traffickers. Akawavi Afalabi, the wife, was the ringleader. Lasisi, the husband, and Derek, the son, were accomplices, according to court documents and law enforcement. Why did they do it? Money. Pure and simple. They made about $4 million off the girls. Paul Fishman is the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. His office prosecuted the case, resulting in convictions.
I think it's hard for some people to believe that in the year 2010 we have people who will actually put people in slavery. It's the most fundamental and intolerable violation of human rights.
A Newark court recently sentenced Akawavi Afalabi to 27 years in prison. The father got 24 years, and the son, 4.5 years.
Because after all the promises she promised me, and then when I got here, all my life was messed up. And I always tell her, if I knew this is how my life was gonna be, I'll never come. I'll never let her take me.
The fact that my clients could be in these hair salons for so many years braiding hair, as young as 9, 10, 11, is extremely frustrating, but it's not shocking. Human trafficking is extremely profitable. It's so profitable that we're seeing some drug traffickers get out of drug trafficking and into human trafficking.
Zena took me on a walk where the girls used to walk every morning to work. From the house to the hair salon down the street. Slave girls walking in plain sight of an entire community.
I always thought of running, but I ain't know nobody, and I didn't know where to go.
Finally, after 5 years, a tip came to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE.
These girls were shielded from the outside world, virtually hidden in plain sight.
After months of surveillance, ICE agents raided the houses. Inside, they found the girls, mattresses on the floor, and filthy conditions. The traffickers had hidden bags of cash and the girls' passports. Something else the agents found? A notebook the girls used to track the tips they received at the hair salon. Ironically, on the cover of that notebook, a picture of the Statue of Liberty. After so much pain, the girls, now young women, were free.
It was a good day because, it helped my life. I was so happy that I was out from the jail. All I did was cry. at her. It was overwhelming. I told myself she finally got what she deserved. She did really, really wrong. She treated us bad, and she was heartless. When I think about it, she was heartless. And I'm happy that she's caught.
Amber Lyon, CNN, Newark, New Jersey.
Okay, if I turn from the picture? Okay. So on again? Yeah. All right. Show me what I can do. Try now? Okay. Is that good? It's working everybody up for sure. Well, when we were hearing, that report hadn't been made, but we'd heard that this case had broken. And we were hearing from members of the New Jersey Attorney General's task force that trafficking could happen in nail salons around here. And it was, I mean, Newark is 15 minutes down the road, and girls are being trafficked and being held as slaves for 5 years, and people are not realizing it. If it's going on in nail salons, we could be experiencing victims and not knowing about it. So that's why we felt we had to put this conference on and tell everybody it is literally happening in our backyards. And that we can be the solution. We need to be the eyes and ears, and we need to make a difference. That conference was very successful, and we thought, after that, what next? Well, we were the advocacy arm of the Junior League, and we decided, okay, what legislation can we put in place to make a difference? We worked with ECPAT, but crucially, we said, hey, we're the Junior League, we'd like a meeting. We asked for a meeting with the governor. The governor gave us a meeting with the then Attorney General Paula Dow. And we sat down with her in a conference room and said, now we've been going to some of your task force meetings, and we're really interested in looking at changing some legislation. We've just had we had another event at Kane University, which was a sort of round table. What legislation should be put in place? Should it be more training? Should it be a diversion program? Whatever should it be? The roundtable discussion, the multiple roundtables discussion said it has to be a comprehensive piece of legislation. So we took that information to the Attorney General, and she said, you know, absolutely, you should talk about this at the task force meetings. But we said, actually, no. Every time we try to raise an issue of legislation, we're told by the attorney that is running the task force that you cannot do that in this group. And she said, from today, you can. So from that day, because we met with her, there was a subcommittee formed that started working specifically on this comprehensive piece of legislation, which, again, thanks to ECPAT, one of the members was then able to draft into full legislation. But then what happened? Here's a story of agencies can just change. That task force stopped existing. It stopped existing for a year. And in that void of a year, we were still trying to do something. Luckily, a legislator came forward, and Patricia, who'd taken over from me, delivered this wonderful legislation to that legislator, and that is what effectively got passed in May. A comprehensive bill, which is called the Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection and Treatment Act. And it's specifically targeted, not at the foreign victims, like the ones you saw in the film, who were covered by legislation passed in 2004, 2005, but the sort of victims that Max is talking about. So we should be very, very proud in this state that we have got the legislative elbow, if you like. I think Polaris Project, another great organization based, one of their offices is here in Newark as well, has given us an A rating now. We used to be a C or D prior to that legislation going through. So that was a really extraordinary experience, and I just wanted to share that this is something that all our organizations are doing, that you've been part of by being members of your organization. You should feel proud of yourselves, and there's plenty more to be done, but it's all going in the right direction, and certainly because people realize that New Jersey is a portal state in some ways. It's not the worst state in the country, every state's affected, but we've got the I-95 corridor, we've got the Elizabeth ports, we've got the airport, we've got that route from New York to Miami where victims are trafficked every 2 weeks, moved from house to house. But New Jersey is a key state, and it's a state that we need to focus our efforts on. Anyone living in the state, part of these organizations, you cannot sit back and think this isn't happening here. It's a new crime, you're learning about it, and you can be the future for making sure New Jersey is not the area where it's going to be a problem anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Our next speaker is Patricia Devine Harms, who is the past chair of the Junior Leagues of New Jersey, the same SPAC committee, which is State Public Affairs Committee, which is a nonpartisan group that represents 3,000 women. Junior League volunteers have been combating human trafficking since 2005, and as Kate just mentioned, during Patricia's leadership, SPAC played a vital role in passing the New Jersey Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act. In addition to SPAC involvement, Patricia records the Montclair Times for the sight impaired, mentors Newark students, co-chairs an education career fair for more than 100 foster youth, and serves on 3 nonprofit boards. Patricia was a freelance meeting planner for pharmaceutical companies, NBA teams, and at the 2002 Olympics in her past life. Please welcome Patricia.
I don't have to stand right in front of the podium, do I? Excellent. I feel sort of like I should be on Star Trek. As was mentioned, I'm Patricia Devine Harms, and what I really want to talk about is the power of collaboration. Because as Kate mentioned with the recent passage of the Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act, while we have been working behind the scenes with the Attorney General's Office and the statewide Human Trafficking Task Force, that merging with Assemblywoman Huddle was working on similar legislation, the merging of those two and the work of the members of the coalition against human trafficking has really propelled everything forward. And so never underestimate your power in making a difference. You're lucky because if I had something in my hand, I'd have to stand even farther away. So the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, it's only been in existence since late 2011. And in the last roughly over a year and a half, because the first official meetings weren't until after Human Trafficking Awareness Day of 2012. So a lot has really happened since that date. This tells you a little bit about who the coalition is. And the great thing about the coalition is that it is not an opportunity to circumnavigate around what other entities are doing. It's really about bringing diverse community groups together, people of different attitudes, different faiths, different socioeconomic levels, to all fight the injustice of human trafficking. And that is the way to really make lasting community change, is to look for these diverse groups. For instance, human trafficking has amazing bipartisan support. And so there may be some elected officials that you might not agree, even if they said it's Tuesday, you might say, oh, I don't think so, I think it's Wednesday, because I'm on Australia time, or I don't think this, I think that. But the great thing is, with human trafficking, or whatever else you may be working on, look for the commonalities, look for the intersections. If there is an elected official who wants to work on eradicating human trafficking, I don't care if I don't agree with anything else that person might believe in. They are my new best friend. They are the new best friend of the State Public Affairs Committee, because it's through that strength that you're going to make a lasting impact. And also, it's great to go before committee hearings to speak about something when they might not expect you to be partnering with someone that you normally aren't partnering with. So that also lends credibility. They know that you've done your homework. They know that you're continuing to learn, that attending tonight is vitally important, but this is just one step. You will absorb different things with each and every time you hear more about human trafficking. Obviously, we know that there is much more power in working together on an issue. And this talks about the what and the how, and I've already touched on it a little bit, and the why. The most important thing is never underestimate the power that each of you have in this room. Just by being here today, you are already advocating alongside and on behalf of current human trafficking victims and on behalf of human trafficking survivors. So just by being aware of it now, you can bring it into your everyday conversation. I stopped at Staples and made copies, and definitely come and visit the back table. And the person making the copies said, you know, I'm hearing more about human trafficking. And I saw a billboard. And I talked to somebody last week and they said, was there a billboard in the Meadowlands about human trafficking? And I said, absolutely. And by virtue of talking to that person, she said, well, I'm really, really aware. And if somebody reaches out to snatch me, it's not going to happen. And I said, well, there are different types of human trafficking. And statistically, just with the exploitation of a child, we are so aware of stranger danger, but we also have to be very aware that a child, if there is abuse and neglect, oftentimes it is by a family member, a trusted friend, a coach. The same with human trafficking. It does happen where someone pulls up and snatches someone literally off the street, but it also happens, as Max was saying, where the traffickers know how to weave a tale of deceit. They know how to look for the vulnerabilities and how to gain trust in that initial grooming period. And so it's being aware that there's a vulnerability through all walks, not just from stranger danger. In the short time the coalition has been in existence, these are our successes. As Kate mentioned, there was a hiatus of a year where the Attorney General oversees a statewide human trafficking task force. It's been rejuvenated and it's incredibly vibrant right now. And they're doing a lot of initiatives and raising awareness as we lead up to and after the Super Bowl. And to make one thing really clear, it's not to vilify the Super Bowl, major sporting events, or the NFL. But the reality is, when you have a major sporting event and people are coming in from all walks of life, oftentimes they're away from their family or away from the knowledge that someone might see them doing something, there's a certain percentage that are going to choose to engage in the commercial sex industry. And the opportunity of the Super Bowl is shining such a bright light on the tri-state area that it is such an enormous opportunity to also shine a bright light on human trafficking. And so that's why we're doing that. We've done, through the coalition, a lot of training of volunteers. And we're doing outreach related to the Super Bowl. And one thing that we were so excited about, as it's already been mentioned, the Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act. That new law is so comprehensive that will also be working to make sure that we see it fully implemented. It is very victim-centered, which is so important. And the other important thing is it's holding traffickers and those who purchase other people more accountable. Where they might be called Johns, the reality is we should refer to those people as predators, sexual deviants, in some cases pedophiles, and those purchasers of other people will be mandated to go to a prostitution offender program. So they're going to learn from the situation that they chose to get involved with. They're going to learn that that is not victimless, how that can be dangerous not only for themselves, but especially for the person in the sex industry. Now we're moving forward. We had such great success in a little bit over a year that we've got 6 months worth of goals. One of the first goals is, since we got about 25 proclamations last year, we just went out and revamped getting more proclamations. And when I mentioned to someone, oh, we're getting proclamations for Human Trafficking Awareness Day, it's January 11th, They said, but isn't that already a national day? I said, yes, it is. Well, isn't that now a state day in New Jersey? Yes, it is. But the opportunity is to get each town in New Jersey aware of this, because it's their first step. Everybody wants to issue a proclamation. It feels great. It's a photo op. People clap. They hand you a plaque. So why not use that as an opportunity to say, by the way, let's look at how we can work on prevention, such as mentoring programs. By the way, I keep hearing that foster youth are really vulnerable. Can we work with our local agency that I know is providing services to foster youth to figure out how we can help that? And so it's one more way to make sure that there is a really diverse collaboration. And as Kate said, when funding streams might close up somewhere else, that means it's really the fight against human trafficking will remain vibrant and continue to grow in the efficacy. We recently started a hotel outreach, and I believe Sister Pat will talk more about this, but the amazing thing is to know that 200 volunteers came together over 2 sessions to learn about how they could approach hotel management. Because the reality is, as Max said, the sex industry oftentimes is now off the street. It's on Backpage.com, and there might be a trafficker actually going and having their victims stay at a hotel or motel for days at a time, weeks at a time. And so by educating the hotel staff, that brings another level of awareness. And oftentimes, ECPAT does a lot of hotel training, and they say that oftentimes hotel staff say, thank you so much. I had a sense that something was happening, but I didn't know what, and I didn't know what to do with that sense. As Liz mentioned, the SOAP campaign, and I really encourage y'all to get involved in this, because this is fast, it's easy, and it's effective. Now, how effective we will not truly know, because if someone is able to, if we're able to reduce demand, if we're able to work on prevention, if we've got all these different sectors of volunteers and law enforcement watching right around the Super Bowl, there will be less trafficking. But the great thing about the SOAP campaign is you choose one day, either January 25th or January 26th. You go, you get some training, you actually wrap bars of soap, which we got funding through the Community Foundation of New Jersey. So labels go on those bars of soap with the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 888-3737-888. I urge you, don't forget that it starts with 888. If you dial 800, you will get a phone sex line. And that shows you that there's money to be made, and folks will figure out how to make money. And so then they're going to wrap the bars of soap, and the volunteers will go out to different hotels that have been given the approval to bring soap to them, or we'll continue a conversation to make sure we can get soap to them that they can actually put in the rooms. Another initiative and partnership, student involvement is so critical. The average age a child is entrapped in the commercial sex industry is 12 to 14. And those of us in the room, most of us are so fortunate that we do not know a trafficking victim. We may have heard a survivor speak, but we don't know. But the reality is every child is vulnerable. We know a survivor who grew up, I believe, in Short Hills. She made her bat mitzvah. She went to college early in Boston. We know a survivor. I was giving a talk with another organization, and a gentleman raised his hand and he said, my granddaughter from an intact family in the DC area in a nice suburb, she was lured away, and she was able to get a cell phone and call home from Patterson about a week later. And so and he said, we didn't know what that was. We thought that was her running away. So another thing, you are already working on awareness and prevention by saying, that wasn't a bad kid that ran away. There was a predator that lured that child away and got them to Patterson. Fortunately, she was reunited, and because he mentioned it, we were able to connect him with a Polaris project and give him some ideas on how to make sure that regardless of what sort of victimization happened to her, that she'll get appropriate services. This slide speaks to Project Stay Gold. They are a student-led initiative in Jefferson Township. The great thing about a student-led initiative is they are making themselves aware about human trafficking, so that is prevention. It's also reducing demand, because if you've got high school boys involved with this, they're not going to go to Las Vegas in their 20s with a bunch of guys and fly into Vegas and then maybe go somewhere else and be involved in the commercial sex trade, because they're going to know that it's not victimist. They're not going to fly to Thailand. They're going to know that it is so important to not exploit other people. They recently had a student summit for Project Stay Gold with 300 students to learn how what Project Stay Gold is doing that's effective, and to have breakout sessions and say, okay, here's what I'm going to take back to my school. So I urge you, if you have contact with high school students or middle-aged students, it's really important to go ahead and start the conversation. Visit their website, which is projectstaygold.org, because they have amazing videos that were created by the kids. And they're saying how you've got to stand up against slavery. And the great thing they do is they don't hold punches. They say, I am an abolitionist. And it's so great to realize that these kids are making a difference. If you've got time, there's another summit in Queens this Saturday. The Coalition Against Human Trafficking is also working with partners doing Stand Up Against Human Trafficking events. There's a group called Stand for Freedom that also does these. They're basically an opportunity to stand in your town square or stand on a college campus and say, by the way, do you know that human trafficking is going on today? And so the great thing about Stand Against Human Trafficking, it can be tailor-made based upon what timing is available, whether you can actually do it on the campus, or maybe there's a way to do it with the really tech-savvy kids. They can have virtual Stand Against Human Trafficking events where they Skype a picture of themselves standing at their desk at school or standing at a weekend job, along with something taking place on a town center. And while one group at William Patterson had an event that was 27 hours, it does not have to be 27 hours. The coalition helped plan one recently in Morristown that was from 9:30 to 6:30, and it didn't even need to be that long. You choose the amount of time that makes sense with your planners. And it's a great way to raise awareness with speeches and getting students involved and music. Finally, here are some resources. Definitely, the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, there is a flyer back there with a list of organizations on the back side. A lot of y'all already are members through your organization. And so if you're not getting emails from them, make sure you're actually on the email distribution list. Project Stay Gold, I already mentioned. And then think into next year. The coalition will be planning a Human Trafficking Awareness Day event. Again, there have actually been 3 events down at the State House, and I'm so proud that Junior League volunteers have been involved in all 3 events. And this year we're looking at doing, with the coalition, Human Trafficking Awareness Day event away from the State House, maybe something related to a sports arena or some sort of sport-related environment. Check out the website for that, which is njhumantrafficking.org. And if you keep that website in mind, the Attorney General's website for the Human Trafficking Task Force is njhumantrafficking.gov. And then finally, the SOAP campaign. That is a great way to make a quick impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. All right, our next speaker is Sister Pat, AKA Patricia Daly. Sister Pat is a Dominican sister of Caldwell, New Jersey, and serves as the Executive Director of the Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investment which is an organization of 40 Roman Catholic dioceses and congregations of women and men in the New York metropolitan area. Sister Pat represents these institutional investors to the National Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, which comprise 300 Roman Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish organizations which hold more than $110 billion in investments. For 35 years, Pat has worked with companies on issues of human rights, labor, ecological concerns, militarism, water, food, equality, health and tobacco, and international finance. Pat led General Electric shareholders to move the company to clean up the Hudson River and has helped to position the agenda of global warming into the priorities of corporate America. Sister Pat works to encourage investors to participate in the work of their companies and continues to mentor people in effective strategies for systemic change. The Dominican preacher, which is Sister Mary Pat, has...
No Mary in my name.
Oh, sorry. Sister Pat has lectured internationally and has been featured in a variety of news outlets, including the New York Times, CNN, 60 Minutes, the Star-Ledger, NPR, and the BBC. A graduate of Sacred Heart University and Mary Knowles School of Theology, Pat is also the recipient of an honorary Doctor of Law degree from William Patterson University and an honorary Doctor of Business Leadership from Duquesne University. Pat sits on the board of Mustard Seed Communities, USA, and Columbia University's Earth Institute's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory.
It's a mouthful. All right. Hi, everybody. I hope I'm in the midst of a really tough reality today. Going to present some great news and also some opportunities. And let me see where we go. All right. You may remember ICCR and the Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investment were founded out of the South Africa divestment years, the apartheid years. And we didn't call for divestment necessarily. We asked companies to leave South Africa. But the faith communities continued to use the power and leverage the power they had as investors. And so when it was actually the Episcopal Church who first filed a shareholder resolution asking General Motors to leave South Africa. That was in the spring of 1971. Last week, I was at the Episcopal Church Pension Fund in New York City with the executive management of Starwood Hotels. Right? Hundreds of properties, sitting down, working with them on their program, training their hotel staffs around human trafficking. All right? So, we have a long, long history with corporations, well over 40 years now. A little testy in the early days, right? Today we really do work as colleagues together. All right? Our human rights work started in South Africa, has been country-specific over the years, and today really is industry and company-specific. What I'd like to do is just give you a little overview of how the investor strategy and actually this volunteer outreach to corporations, to hotels, has emerged, right? And really came out of faith shareholders as well as many, many other collaboratives. Today what we do is we work with companies and have been for decades now on human rights policies. Right? 40 some odd years ago, companies didn't have policies around human rights. They didn't have policies around the environment and their sustainability, right? And their commitment to sustainability. Today, those policies are part of the culture of a company, all right? At least the largest of the companies around the world. We work with them digging down deep, right? What was an issue 15 years ago, all right, trafficking today is an issue. That didn't exist in the supply chain, or it wasn't as evident to us in the supply chain 15 years ago. Right? So as we work with companies, we work on how they're going to implement these human rights strategies, how they're going to verify that anything's really working or changing, that companies need to report back, not just to shareholders, but to consumers around their policies. We work with them in terms of the companies, how many, the supply chain, all right? In 80 years ago, when Ford Motor Company was building cars, right? You had Henry Ford bringing in ore, iron ore, right? I mean, everything was coming into the River Rouge plant, right? They were making the parts in different parts of the plant, and everything came in. They were all Ford employees, and a Ford car left. That today takes about 7 or 8 tiers, right? And a few years ago, even though Ford Motor Company has the best human rights policy in the entire industry, automotive industry, all right, they found that there was slave labor in the pig iron industry in Brazil. Now what do we do, right? So you have to deal with that. Okay, so that's kind of some of the work that we do around just general human rights. We started working on human trafficking in the supply chain and also really focusing on the travel and tourism industry in 2005. So it's 8 years now. We were writing shareholder resolutions, asking hotels to report on what kind of training they were offering to their employees around to identify and also respond to incidents of human trafficking. Right? Airlines as well. Some of the online travel programs. Right? We were able in some cases to bring ECPAC into those company meetings, especially those companies that would not talk to ECPAC. Right? All right, we were saying, well, we're going to bring people in who do this for a living, right? Also knowing that this is not just about children, right? And then we're also then working, once we started working with the travel and tourism industry, then we realized trafficking is in the fashion industry, right? It's in factories, trafficked people are in factories, in mining, all throughout the supply chain, and also very much so in agriculture. And that's where our state is also really at risk as well. These are some of the companies that have received shareholder resolutions or that we're in dialogue with. Okay? Some of them have actually signed the ECPAC code. So some additional, obviously, we started with Continental. We know they're united right now. In September, Delta, who is a signatory to ECPAC, Delta in late September had trained 6,000 employees. We met with them last week. They're up to 36,000. And now have also committed to work with us on the contracts with the hotels that they have in those airports, right? So that they know that, see how wonderful this is, right? Everybody's connected, right? So you just, you know, if you're going to have a contract with a local hotel in an airport that you're servicing, well, that hotel has to be able to implement training to identify trafficked people and children, right? So look at the power of consumers and investors. Right? So we're kind of an insider strategy. All of our meetings are, which is one of the things that ECPAC had to agree to, all right? All of those meetings are confidential. We meet, policies change, nobody's going to the press right afterwards, right? That's how, because we have this trust, right? Something happens, very often I get a phone call from a top executive at an oil company or an auto company or some of the largest chains, you know, shopping stores, we have a problem. Can you help us? Right? That's kind of the relationship that we have now. Doesn't mean we're not pushing them at every point. Right? The other piece is that we're very reliant as well on people who are involving outsider strategies, especially consumers. Right? So, for instance, a year ago, after working with a pretty resistant executive team at Hershey Chocolate, right, there was child labor, not just identified here in the United States, but certainly the whole cocoa industry, all right, has child labor. Cotton, Uzbekistan, and the cotton industry. I mean, the government takes kids out of school and, really encamps them to work in the cotton fields. So Hershey, just a year ago, agreed that by 2020, their chocolates, all of their brands, would be certified. And that's also, it's a human rights as well as an environmental certification. Right? It was also very important that so many other organizations and customers, right, consumers, were pushing Hershey to do that. All right, so here, let's talk about the Super Bowl. About 4 years ago, our coalitions, our members, right, of ICCR had been working with Super Bowl sponsors, all right, as corporations, raising the issue with the sponsors. We were then working to reach out to the hotels. Now, in Dallas, which was the first initiative 4 years ago when the Super Bowl was in Dallas, that group that did the hotel outreach was about 15 sisters who reached out to maybe, 36 hotels. Okay? The next year, in Indianapolis, alliances were made with the AG's office, the Attorney General's office. They're really seen in many cases as a model. You can go on their website for the Indiana Attorney General, and they've got any kind of material you can ever imagine to be able to train staffs on trafficking. Right? That initiative probably involved 30 sisters, right? As well as a couple of other ICCR members and other initiatives. And they went to a 50-mile radius. I think they also reached out to about 40 hotels. Right? This and a similar piece in New Orleans. Now, 4 years ago, the connection between human trafficking and the Super Bowl was not very well known. Right? We've also been working with companies who were sponsors of the Olympics, of the World Cup, right? I mean, all of these, think about this. The Super Bowl is in New Jersey in February. A week later, the Olympics open up in Russia. Picture the risk to people who were trafficked there, right? So, in many cases, this is totally unprecedented for two reasons. The New York area has thousands of hotels, right? As well as amazing numbers of volunteers. And the other piece is that the issue of human trafficking has built a huge momentum over the years. So more and more people do understand that there are people who are trafficked, even in our area, and then secondly, that they also, I just want to check on my time, now that I know the time, I lost my train of thought. But they're trafficked in the area. So we've got incredible understanding and also media attention around this as well. All right, so right now, Patricia had referenced the 200 volunteers reaching out to about 300 hotels, 300 to 400 hotels here in New Jersey. We're out of my office, and I'm sorry, Margot Morris, who works with me, She just graduated from Notre Dame. She's full-time. I threw her into this work in August, and she's just been amazing. She does have a headache tonight, so I said, all right, you can stay home. But she not only is she coordinating the volunteers here in New Jersey, but we have volunteers in Connecticut, in New York, and Philadelphia, in the Pennsylvania. So we have well over 300 to 400 volunteers reaching out to over 1,000 hotels in that 4-state corridor. So we'll also be able to talk a little later if you have any interest in still helping us. I think we've got the hotels in New Jersey covered, but we've got a lot of New York hotels that we still need help with. Most times when we reach out to hotels, managers are they're as devastated as anyone would be. We do have to remember, however, that and so we're going to work in collaboration. These are great relationships to forge, and we need to make sure that this is not just about the Super Bowl, right? It's about changing policies so that I really envision in another few years, all of the hotels around the planet are going to have programs in place. We're going to put ECPAC out of business. That's going to be a great thing, right? And the other piece is that anybody who's going to be studying to work in the travel and leisure program, that the schools are all going to have programs in place, right? Right now, here and there, maybe there's a speaker. There's no attention to it. We're going to have schools that really take this seriously, and the Starwood hotels and Wyndham Worldwide are going to be demanding, right, that people are already trained in this. Right? That's really how this system shifts. Right? I think I've already talked about this. One more thing to remember: people have become commodities. Right? This is a $32 billion industry. And as long as people can make money, it's going to be a problem for us, right? So we really have to stem the access and work with all kinds of colleagues to be able to really take this business out of business. Right? So I thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sister Pam. All right, and our final speaker for tonight, we will now shift and hear from a perspective of law enforcement and what is being done here at the county level. David Hummel is Special Deputy Attorney General and Acting Assistant Prosecutor for the Union County Prosecutor's Office. He graduated from Rowan University with a degree in criminal justice in 1996 and received his JD from Widener School of Law in 1999 and has been employed as an assistant prosecutor with the Union County Prosecutor's Office since 2000. Since joining the prosecutor's office, he has been assigned to the Juvenile Domestic Violence and Quarantine Unit. During his time in these units, he prosecuted numerous cases for various offenses, including attempted murder, robbery, and distribution of narcotics. In 2005, he was assigned to the Child Abuse Unit, where he handled allegations of physical and sexual abuse of children under the age of 13. In 2006, he became supervisor of the Sex Crimes Unit, where he prosecuted cases involving sexual abuse of adult and adolescent victims. In 2012, he was appointed Deputy Director of the newly formed SVU, Special Victims Unit. I felt like I was reading something from Law and Order as I was sharing this with you, where he is responsible for prosecuting allegations of sexual abuse and teaching various classes to local law enforcement officers regarding sexual abuse. In July of 2012, he was appointed Union County Prosecutor's Office Liaison for Human Trafficking. In this capacity, he is responsible for reviewing all allegations of human trafficking in Union County. He has attended numerous meetings and training with various state and federal agencies
to review methods to detect, prevent, and prosecute human trafficking cases. Since being named a liaison, he has assisted state and federal agencies in several human trafficking investigations. Here is David Homer.
Everyone get up and stretch their feet. Alex, you're killing me there.
I just stood up.
Still ready.
It stands for End Child Prostitution, Child Pornography, and Trafficking of Children for Sexual Purposes. I'm trying to shift away because it's a mouthful. I'm trying to just go by ECMAT.
So is that a volunteer organization or a private?
No, it's
Okay, I apologize. No comment.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. I just did want to talk a little bit about my experience with human trafficking and really law enforcement, where we started and where we are right now. In 2012, the Attorney General of New Jersey put out a directive to all law enforcement agencies, which was basically standards that they wanted us to use and employ in investigating human trafficking cases. One of those issues, or one of the provisions of that, was each prosecutor's office had to delegate 2 people to be human trafficking liaisons, a detective and assistant prosecutor. In July of 2012, the prosecutor called me up to his office, and of course, first thing in my mind is, uh-oh, what did I do wrong now this time? I got up there and he's like, I've got something I want you to handle. I was like, okay, what's that? It's like, I want you to be the office's liaison for human trafficking. And I was like, okay. I'm like sitting there, act like I know what human trafficking is, so I don't blow this. So I asked him, I'm like, well, who's handling this now from our office? Who does human trafficking here? He's like, well, we don't have anybody. You're going to be the first one who does this. I'm like, okay. So I go back to my office, open up the law book, start reading what human trafficking is. I figured in my mind I saw the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and that's about human trafficking, so I had some background from that. But that was about it. In January of this year, the Attorney General's office and the Division of Criminal Justice put together a 3-day training for all the liaisons and other law enforcement people in Union County. On the second day, they brought in a speaker from Homeland Security who talked about a 2-year investigation that he did with women being smuggled from Africa and different regions. And at the end of it, he said how they had saved 50 human trafficking victims. They had to rent a whole hotel to put them up, and they kept them there for like a month. That this had gone on for years and everything. A bunch of us from different prosecutors' offices all sat down that day afterwards and like, we cannot handle this. There is no way. I'm like, I can't get a new laptop in my office. There's no way I can get the prosecutor to pay for hotel rooms for all these victims and stuff. What are we going to do? After this 3-day training, every month we have these liaison meetings. And the first one we had in January, I remember we're all sitting there. And the head of it was sitting there asking all of us from our counties, like, okay, what's going on with human trafficking? And we're all kind of like, I don't know. We heard that there are prostitutes who are being picked up in vans and, transported to New York. Or down south, there are a bunch of migrant workers, working on these farms. But none of us really kind of knew what to do or have a handle on it. Last month at our meeting, that was back in January, where we are right now, at our meeting last month, they were talking about how coming up within the next 2 weeks, 2 people were going to be indicted for human trafficking. Another one had just been arrested for human trafficking. Our county and 2 other counties were speaking about how we're going to be doing undercover operations within the next couple weeks to try to find victims of human trafficking. And in that time from January until now, the human trafficking law has been changed and amended to where now in New Jersey, human trafficking in New Jersey is the second toughest crime there is outside of homicide. Homicide in New Jersey, you can get 30 to life in prison. For human trafficking in New Jersey, it's 20 years to life, where you have to do 20 years in prison if you're convicted. On top of that, under the new legislation, the hotels, the taxi drivers, they can all be held responsible if they're knowingly transporting victims of human trafficking. We now have that at our disposal. And the Johns that are getting victims, they're not treated as Johns anymore. If they're knowingly getting human trafficking victims and underage girls, it's up to 10 years in prison that they could be sentenced to, where they have to do at least 3 years in prison. We now have all these tools in place. My time in the prosecutor's office, I've done really every type of crime there is. I've done homicide, drug cases, thefts, robberies, everything. And I can tell you, above and beyond, by far, human trafficking is the hardest case to investigate. The reason for that is, I think if any of us in this room saw somebody walk into a store and pull out a gun and the clerk started ripping money out of the cash register there, we'd all be like, oh my gosh, there's a robbery going on, call the police. Or if the police walk up on somebody who's been shot 5 times, you know, it's a homicide there. But if you ask somebody, all right, tell me what human trafficking looks like, you know, how do you describe it? What are you looking for? At one of our meetings recently, they were talking about how a patrol officer from South Jersey went to a local gas station. When he got at the gas station, there was a worker there who was from Uzbekistan. And the police officer noticed that inside the garage at the gas station there was a mattress there with some clothing on the floor. And it kind of raised his suspicion a little bit. So he started talking to the worker, but he only had broken English. And the worker started saying, yeah, you know, I sleep here. And the officer was asking him more questions, you know, like, why do you do that? You know, what's going on? And he started talking about, you know, they have my papers, they have my papers. So what the officer did was he called his local supervisor there, had the supervisor come out, but there was this language barrier, so they called the manager of the gas station to come out. The manager of the gas station talked to this worker in private in their own language, and the cops have no idea what they're saying to each other. Lo and behold, after this worker and the manager spoke to each other, the manager's like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding. He didn't understand what you're saying. And of course, the worker just went along with it, where more than likely this manager was involved in the trafficking, and that worker was never seen at that gas station again. You know, people just don't know what the signs are. Also with the victims, we don't have victims coming in to us and saying, hey, I'm a human trafficking victim. If somebody gets their car stolen, you know, their house broken into, immediately they're running to the police. Human trafficking victims don't do that. It's because they've been threatened. A lot of times if, you know, they're threatened, if they're coming from a different country, the traffickers are telling them, hey, I have people back in the home country where, you know, if you don't go with what I'm saying, your family's going to get killed back there. They take their papers, so they don't have any papers. They may not be familiar with our legal justice system here, so they think if they're working as a prostitute, they're going to get arrested and do something wrong. A lot of times the victims don't even see themselves as real victims. They almost get brainwashed. The first case I had dealing with human trafficking was actually a week after I got out of that 3-day training. A woman reported to the Elizabeth Police Department. She said that she was a go-go dancer who worked at a go-go bar, and she knew a guy from there, and he took her back to his place, and he sexually assaulted her there. She went to the Elizabeth Police Department. She reported there, and they started the investigation there. She met with a very experienced detective there who sat down, took a statement from her regarding what happened with the sexual assault, and then they sent it to me to review it. I had the woman come down to our office. I met with her and another detective, and I started asking her questions, you know, about the guy that allegedly sexually assaulted her. And, you know, I was just asking her, well, you know, how did you know him and everything? What was your relationship with him? And she started saying, you know, I knew him from the bar because he was a driver for me. And I was like, well, what do you mean a driver for you? Just explain what that was. Well, as we started asking more questions, it turns out what her story was when she was 20 years old, she went to a local go-go bar to try to work as a dancer there. She went there, she started working as a dancer, and a woman came up to her in the bar and said, look, I'm a manager for a bunch of different dancers, and I can get you out of this place and get you into some of the higher class go-go bars where you'll make more money. So this girl, she's young, she's 20 years old, and for her, she's like, you know, this is great. I'm going to have somebody doing the work for me, get me in these better places, thinking, you know, that it's something good for her. For the first couple of days, this person sets up different jobs for her, different go-go bars where she's working there, and then she says things start changing. This person tells her, well, now I'm going to assign a driver to you, and you're going to have to pay some of your money to this driver. He's going to provide the transportation for you, so we're sure you're getting there on time. Then she got somebody who's assigned security to her that went along with the driver. She had to go with him, and she had to pay a cut of her money to him. Then she had to take a cut of her money that she made and pay it to the manager at the bar, to the manager, this female that she had met, and then also to the DJs. She said by the end of the night, many times she had less money than what she started out with. So this female manager who approached her originally said, well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to basically teach you how to do different sex acts that you're going to start doing to the customers in the go-go bar, because if you don't do that, you owe the bouncer money, you owe the protection guy money, you owe the driver, and one of those guys is going to essentially beat you up if you don't pay them. So now this girl, she's working at the go-go bars and being forced to do sex acts with the customers there to make enough money to pay off all these people. When I was talking to her, I'm sitting there explaining, you realize, that you're a victim of this here, that, this isn't something that's okay. And she just kept saying, you know what, look, I was given drugs, I got into prostitution, or not prostitution, I got into dancing, who's going to believe me? Who's going to care about all this? And, I had to explain to her, you didn't make yourself this way, they made you this way. So that was really, she was somebody who went to an experienced police officer initially, sat down to just talk about a rape, and even speaking to a police officer, the signs weren't there. He didn't know what questions to ask, and it turned out to be a lot more. What we've done in Union County, like I said, when I left that 3-day training, there was 3 of us in Union County. There was me, a detective from our office, and somebody from the Elizabeth Police Department that went to that training. And my first thought was, all right, 3 people is not going to be enough for what we have to do. We're going to need at least 4. So, so what we did at the prosecutor's office was I got in contact with somebody from Federal Homeland Security. They have their own human trafficking unit there. I met with them the first time, and literally it was at Taco Bell in Linden over lunch. And it was me and an agent, and he was new to the unit, and the 2 of us sat there, and I was like, we had the same conversation with each other, where I'm like, you know what, there's human trafficking out there, it's really bothering me, I want to do something about it. He's like, yeah, me too. He's like, I'm new to the unit, I want to go out there, I want to get these guys. So what we did was, there is a website called Backpage.com that is just, it's famous for human trafficking. It's been going on for years. That's where a lot of the human trafficking is going on, and it's basically like Craigslist. You go on there, you punch in escorts. If you go on that website and punch in your town or one of the towns around you, I guarantee you there will be an ad on there for a prostitute that will come to your town. So what we've been doing is we've been going to local hotels, we're getting rooms there, and then we've been just calling the prostitutes to come to the room. The first night we did this was a couple months ago, and I'm literally sitting in a room with 20 federal agents wondering how the heck did my career turn into this? I wonder, what did I get myself into? The first woman who showed up, it was 7:30 at night. She literally had $3,000 on her from working as a prostitute that day, and it was 7:30 at night. The second woman that showed up was a human trafficking victim. She was 28 years old. She had come here from Honduras. When she got here, she was basically brought up here from somebody that was living in the United States. She was in Honduras at the time, who convinced her to come up here. When she came up here, right away, this guy said, look, you're going to start working as a prostitute, and beat her up and threatened her if she didn't do it. For 2 years, she worked as a prostitute for him, where he would take all the money, physically assault her if she didn't go along with it. Eventually, he got her pregnant, and she had the baby. After she had the baby, she basically told him, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it. Number one, I'm barely sleeping with the new baby and everything. I want to be with my child. And he kept threatening her, saying, you have to do this. I don't care. Get out there. You got to earn the money. She started doing it a little bit more of the prostitution, but she was kind of pushing back a little bit and getting resistant. So he took the baby and went back to Honduras without her knowing. He basically told her from there, you're going to keep working as a prostitute and you're going to send the money back here, or you're never going to see your child again. Or I'm in Honduras, I'll kill the kid down there and nothing's going to happen to me. She kept working as a prostitute for another 6 months before she eventually got arrested in Pennsylvania for it. She got placed in jail in Pennsylvania, and she was able to contact somebody who was staying here that knew him in Honduras and was able to get in contact with him. And she asked him, just send money so I can bail out of jail so I can get out. And he didn't do it. He left her there, didn't send her anything, and she stayed in the jail cell for 3 months before she was finally released. When she got out, she said, you know what? He's not going to take care of me. He's not going to support me. And she basically gave up. She's like, I just know I'm never going to see my child again. But here she is in this country. All she's ever done is worked as a prostitute. She has no support here, no family, nothing. She has no skills. So what did she do? She went back to being a prostitute. And that's how we came in contact with her through the operation that we were doing. And this was the second person that we had called that come out. It's there, it's out there. So what we're doing now, we are doing these operations, and we're not the only county. Every county's out there, they're doing this type of work. We're also out there educating everyone. I just came from a meeting today with the prosecutor about what our final strategy is going to be for educating everybody. We're going to have in January a big law enforcement training at our police academy, where we're hoping to have at least 5-6 people from every department in Union County trained in law enforcement. We have a survivor coming out and speaking. We're also going out to all the hotels in Union County to speak with them. We called up a lot of the transportation people to get them to come out. And I had a conversation with a couple of them where they're all like, in the beginning, they're like, we're not coming out, this is our livelihood. Who's going to pay us if we're missing work and have to come out and, miss a day of work for some training? So, we said, I appreciate that. I can understand. I'm sorry that you have to miss it. We just thought that you may be interested in this training since you could do 10 years in prison for driving these women around. But if you don't want to, it's good. We'll miss it. And then lo and behold, everyone was like, what? What are you talking about? We'll show up. So we have a lot of the transportation people coming in. There's one more group that we are actively recruiting, and it is sitting in front of me right now. There's a little 5-minute video that I just want to show you, and then I'm going to just finish up my presentation. Turn it on. If it explodes real loud, it is not my fault.
From the very, very beginning, they drilled it into my head, they drilled it into her head that, if we try to act up, something really bad was going to happen. He threw me into the dining room table, busted me up pretty good, but Chrissy, she dragged up the stairs by her hair, threw her down the stairs, and did it again like 3 more times. I didn't want to end up dead, I didn't want her dead, and it be my fault, it's like they had us completely wrapped, completely controlled, to where we were brainwashed, to where we were like, okay, we have to do this or else, something bad could happen. That's what they did. They just played us off each other, and it worked.
A lot of the truck stops I go into, you see a lot of the girls, and a lot of them are very young.
This one, she didn't even look 13, 14 years old. She had a little mini skirt on, but within 30 minutes, that girl had done been in 3 or 4 trucks.
My son and I were driving through Oklahoma City, had the radio on, and the guy comes on the radio, hey, anybody want any underage girls?
To realize that this is going on in America is disturbing.
When most people think of the problem of child prostitution and sexual exploitation of children, they think of it as being a problem for foreign countries, for third world nations, and doesn't exist here in the U.S., and that's just not true. If you have adult prostitution going on in your area, you have child prostitution going on in your area.
Here we are, I'm 15 years old, my cousin's 14, and we're here at a truck stop, being forced to work it, being forced to go from truck to truck, asking, if the guy would like to have sex with us, and we're young girls, terrified out of our minds.
Nobody wakes up and says, gosh, I'd really like to sell myself on the streets today. That is something that is being directed by the victimizer, by the trafficker. And these kids find themselves in a situation they literally cannot get out of.
it was just an awful experience. How many truck drivers, was okay with it. Not thinking that, this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's family member, that it is missed, you don't think of that, that they don't want to be here. Thank God what saved me was that truck driver that did think that, that called in and said, hey, this is whoever at the TA's truck stop, and we have some girls out here that look pretty young. 911.
Oh, that trucker. The one that made that phone call. I think about him all the time. I have never met him. I don't know who he is, but boy, I owe him a lot. If it wasn't for him calling the police and saying that she just doesn't look right there, I have no idea what would have happened. Boy, am I thankful to him, to that truck driver. God, am I thankful to him. And if he ever sees this, thank you, thank you, thank you.
The reason why I show that video is just, you don't have to be a trained law enforcement officer, you don't have to be a federal agent to make a difference. You guys are all deputized now. By sitting through this tonight and coming out in the cold, you now work for me. You're not getting paid, but you're deputies now. In the back, I put out flyers that are just some of the indicators to look for in human trafficking. And like we talked about, you may have come in contact with the victim already at your hair salon, at your gas station, just somebody out on the street. So we do have brochures back there, just some signs to look for that could indicate human trafficking. But I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is something that I am really passionate about, and I think it's very serious, and we are, believe me, making a difference within the past year. So thanks for coming out.
Before we go to the question and answer period, just to note that there is a group, which David has here, and it's called Truckers Against Trafficking. They have a website, and they are aware, and they do work on this issue. I wanted to make a couple of announcements. In terms of what David was just saying, the forms of human trafficking that take place globally and in the state of New Jersey, hair braiding salons in Newark, the farms in South Jersey, the massage parlors that do not look inviting or as regular spas that lure you in with the promotions. They're usually massage places that are offering commercial sex. And they usually have their curtains drawn. They're open for about 12 hours a day. If you and I were to go in, they may push us away and not be accepting to take our reservation. And the nail salons. There's also domestic labor in the restaurants and in households. As you know, in the news, we've heard about a lot of diplomats from the UN who had brought over women who were working as domestic slaves. Human trafficking does not discriminate. It happens to young women, it happens to young girls, and it covers a wide variety of socioeconomic groups. It happens here on college campuses and all of the other forms that you've seen. But I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes we think it is all the way halfway around the world, but it is happening here. With the SOAP initiative, Patricia explained what we are doing. There will be 2 trainings. If you go to the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking website, you'll see the event. You can follow the link and register on Eventbrite. There is a $10 cost, but that is to cover the breakfast and the lunch. Teresa, who is a survivor and who is the founder of SOAP, I saw her story on MSNBC following the Indiana Super Bowl and reached out to her, and as a result of that, she is now doing this for us for Super Bowl New Jersey, New York.
And her idea was, how can I help another survivor? What would have helped me? And she thought of a number on this little bar of soap in a motel room. Sister Pat targeted high-end, and we're targeting rinky-dinky, lower-end motels near the stadium. And so this little bar of soap, at the time that her story aired, one girl called that number. And it was still too early to see how many would call in. But for us, for me, one is one less that's out there. So please consider joining us. She will train us. Following the training, we will go out in groups. So no one is expected to do this alone. We will go in groups, visit the nearby motels, and say to the manager, are you willing to place these little bars of soaps in the guest rooms, in the bathrooms? And that is what we will be doing in a way to carry the message. The other thing is, please jot down the number for the trafficking hotline, because you never know when you can use this. How will you know if a victim is trafficked? In the nail salons, they do not speak. They keep their heads down. They're very intimidated. The money, you'll see someone handling all of the money perhaps. There's no communication, no eye contact. They may look grungy. Definitely no interpersonal skills. In the restaurants, maybe similar, harder to detect. With people who are domestic slaves, same thing. There may not be too much contact. You may not see them go out alone. They're always accompanied. If you go to the polarisproject.org site, you will read what the signs of a trafficking victim are and how you can help. I got involved in this issue 2009 when I became a League of Women Voters member. I saw a presentation about massage parlors in the tri-state area. On my way to Willowbrook to New York City, I spotted such a spot out of the corner of my eye, and I started to take action. To what Patricia was saying, the power of individuals joining groups. Through the League, I organized a local community forum. I wrote op-eds. That spa shut down. However, realistically, I know that they probably relocated 2 towns over, because that is the nature of this beast. However, you have to get involved. You can write op-eds, join a larger group, have your organization join the coalition, because that is where effect can happen. So write down the number for the trafficking. You'll see it on the Polaris Project, but I learned this from Kate at Polaris Project.
There's a paper in the back that has a list of all the phone numbers, including the...
Okay, thank you. Marlene says there is a flyer in the back that has the number, but I'll just read it out for whoever's ready. It's 1-888-3737-888. Okay? And then not 800. That'll defeat our purpose. 2 other quick announcements. I wanted to thank, before I forget, Marlene Sincaglia, Leslie Carson, and Melissa Tassi, because they were instrumental in getting the word out and in helping with the organization and having us all here present. The other announcement, there is, Kate, do you want to make the announcement about the fundraiser?
Well, if anyone feels like they don't want to leave here without making some gesture and contribution, the coalition isn't a 501c3, so we would prefer, if anyone wants to help, that they give a contribution to ECPAT USA to continue their amazing work. So if you feel like you would like to leave a donation, there's a blue basket in the back there, and that will go directly to ECPAT USA's amazing work.
And then Pat Dolan from the League of Women Voters, is she here? Pat, would you like to make your announcement? About the books. About the books?
It's sort of an unusual thing. I think I spoke with you, Patricia, at the County College.
Right, King.
And we had talked about books I was reading to try and become more informed. We mentioned that it would be nice if we started a book group or just have the books in the library. There weren't many in my local library, but I bought them on Amazon. And I brought this to the attention of freeholders that had spoke at the county college. And I think from the way I understand it, they are purchasing for the library 2 books, every library in Union County. So, you know, hopefully they'll be read, but it would be great if we could get some kids or somebody to actually do book groups and just read these books now that they're coming into the library.
And the titles of the books are Not for Sale and The Slave Next Door. Okay, that's
What's the
good.
second?
The Slave Next Door and Not for Sale, which Not for Sale is also an organization.
Elizabeth, there's one other announcement.
Oh, yes.
Really, if anybody's really motivated and is free tomorrow, just come along to the coalition meeting that will be figuring out how we can take action for Human Trafficking Awareness Day in January. So come along. It's in Whippany, not far from here, at the Jewish Federation headquarters. The details are there, or you can just go onto the coalition's website and find out more about it.
And just one last thing. In terms of advocacy, I do have some good news to share with you. This coming next June, my mentor and I will be presenting to our state convention for the League of Women Voters concurrence with a few other states. We just did our state study on human trafficking here, and we're going to hopefully have that pass. So that will allow leagues across the country to further advocate for victims and to push for stricter legislation and what have you. So that's a positive. And I can share with you, it's not always easy. I took that motion 2 years ago to the convention, and believe it or not, we lost by 38 votes. Such a heartbreaking subject. And we lost to food labeling, which I'm all for. But I think when you're talking about slavery and people's right to life, literally, it was, but things are meant to be, and now hopefully it'll pass now. But I turn it over to you. Thank you for coming here. If you have questions, we'll open it up for questions. Okay, go ahead.
There was an article written about the new law that's been passed about trafficking. And one of the problems is that it's a federal law overrides a state law. That just happens. And it said, backers of the measure said during legislative hearings it was needed to hold websites, particularly those that offer classified advertisements responsible for perpetuating child sex abuse and underage prostitution. A judge in New Jersey has already struck it down. And one of the things I think we have to do is get to our senators and our congressmen, because the law has to be changed, and it's a federal law that supersedes state law, and it has to be changed. And I think this is another thing that we could all do, write letters, do campaigns, but it needs to be changed, otherwise it will continue. And they
I can speak to that.
Patricia can actually give an update, because
So the really comprehensive law that Governor Chris Christie signed on May the 6th, one component of that was holding internet advertisers culpable when they knowingly advertised for commercial sex without asking for an ID. And so what happened was they knew that that was going to be perhaps a constitutional issue. They also knew, the authors of this bill that became law, they also knew that it might go up against the Communications Decency Act, which is the federal component you spoke about. So in the writing of the really comprehensive bill, they made sure that the rest of New Jersey's Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act could go ahead and be implemented. But now we're saying, okay, there's a temporary injunction on holding Backpage.com liable. There was a hearing before a federal judge in Newark. The federal judge said, I'm going to continue this temporary injunction. The amazing thing is that that brought more light to the issue. And the authors of the bill knew it was going to be a sticking point. And the Attorney General's office also knew it was going to be a sticking point, and they said, that's okay, we are forging ahead. And Backpage.com stood up there and told the judge, well, we know there's trafficking on our site, but we're working with law enforcement to try to stop it. And just this summer, you probably heard about the FBI sting, where they rescued over 100 trafficking victims in the commercial sex industry. They also arrested, I think it was 150 pimps or something. It was a large number. This was in 75 cities. And an expert with that initiative said, yes, Backpage, if they want to say they cooperated, they basically were given a subpoena to say, show us what's happening, and they cooperated that way. But there's an opportunity to look at the Communications Decency Act, which was passed in 1996, to give people confidence in ordering over the internet and say, wait a second, times have changed since 1996, and we've got confidence in Amazon.com, we've got confidence in Travelocity. What we want to do is go after the advertisers for human trafficking. And so that is a great idea on the federal level.
I just wanted to say that the Presbyterian Church in New Providence is asking for volunteers for November the 20th to bring your track phone, and they're all going to have something printed up to call the hotels. That's what they're doing.
Maybe just as a suggestion so that we don't duplicate effort, because that's one of the things that the coalition really is striving for, is to bring everybody together, because this way we can work as one. So I would highly recommend, if you can get in touch, if you can connect with Sister Pat, not Sister Mary Pat, with Sister Pat, and exchange information, because this might also be a good opportunity for, if it's your church or for that church or that group, to now become a coalition member as well.
If I could just speak to that, we really have the members of the New Jersey Coalition in the training that we've done, and we've had a few hours of training for each of these volunteers, and we really are encouraging people not to go rogue in contacting hotels themselves. So I really applaud efforts, but let's also, there is special training for that, especially because you really want to make sure that people are trying to establish relationships with hotel staffs and general managers, invite them into a collaborative, concern. So, so let's please talk. And Margot Morris in my office is the coordinator of the volunteers. Okay, thank you.
Well, is the program you're doing with the hotels, is this about the soap? Is that?
There are two different expressions of the hotel outreach. First one is that we really want to reach out to every hotel in New Jersey, and actually Connecticut, Fairfield County down to Philadelphia, right? And we need volunteers to do that. They have a script, right? There's a reporting mechanism back to us so that we know. They are encouraged to do a lot of research about the hotels prior to that. We give them some of it, right? In terms of, are they a Starwood hotel? Maybe they've already had some training, if they're a Wyndham hotel, et cetera, et cetera. But as Liz had said, we're reaching out to every hotel, right? Not every hotel is going to be looking to use the soap, but the hotels who hung up on our volunteers, some joint in, on Tunley Avenue in Jersey City, right? They knowingly know what's going on, but they might take the soap. It's free soap, right? I mean, let's face it, right? So, we all understand, right? There's a range of opportunities here, let's put it that way. So there are two different programs, but two different dimensions of that, okay?
Different people doing
Oh, we're all basically part of this New Jersey Coalition again. Yeah, so we all know we know what's going on, and we're all collaborating together on that. So it's really good to keep the information together so we all do know.
Is there any effort like to go after the guys, the Johns, so to speak, to like reduce demand or like instill fear in them that they're gonna, you know, get locked away forever kind of thing?
What we've been doing with ours is where technically there are no Johns in our operation because it's the officers being undercover. So we're bringing in the girls, we're talking to them, we're finding out, you know, are they real victims or are they just voluntarily prostituting themselves? We're arresting whatever drivers are driving them there for promoting prostitution and trying to work our way up from there. We haven't had a case yet where we've had an underage girl working as a prostitute and we get the John through there. So what we've been doing is basically focusing on the girls to find out if they are victims and then working our way up through the organization, the drivers, the managers, that type of thing. So that's what we've been focusing on.
Can I just say, though, that the coalition is actively, we recognise that we could make a huge difference if we could get men's groups involved in the coalition work. So if you know of any men's groups that might be interested in learning more about this issue and wanting to educate, you know, male organisations, that would be a huge step in the right direction. It's definitely a huge area, but so far, I have to say those coalition meetings are sort of 95% women. We would love to see it be 50-50.
And then also, you know, after you find out if they're a victim and it's kind of like you agree or they're willing to like get out of the situation, where do they go? You know, like, so you have like a foster home or they just, you know, get stuck in jail basically because they got nowhere to go?
First of all, if we determine they're victims, under the statute, that's a defense to the prostitution. We're not allowed to arrest them for prostitution if they're actual human trafficking victims.
I didn't mean like lock them up, but
no,
like give them a place to stay, and that's the only place is the jail cell.
We've been working with Homeland Security, and they have different agencies. There's different agencies like the Polaris Project. There's a whole bunch of different non-governmental organizations. The one girl I talked about who was the go-go dancer that was a victim, we found a place for her out in, I think it was Warren County, where there's a group, I think it's Jesus Loves Strippers or something like that, that we actually, they go out to go-go bars and talk to the girls as they come out and give them, I think it's Jesus Loves Stripper shirts or whatever, and they have places set up where we got her job training off drug dependency. It was basically, we took her out of her environment onto a farm and she's turned her life around. So no, we're not holding them in jails. We're not holding them in any detention facilities. We're putting them in safe places away from their traffickers where they're getting, you know, off the drugs if they are on drugs, you know, where they can just be safe.
And I can speak to foster youth. Foster youth are really vulnerable. The LGBTQI are also very, very vulnerable. And it used to be in New Jersey, and still in some states this is applicable, where if a foster child was in the commercial sex industry and they were a trafficking victim, the trafficker could not be held liable for child abuse or neglect because they weren't the guardian. Which was really bizarre, because if someone is enslaving another person, you are absolutely the guardian. And also it was seen that since they weren't the guardian, that child, it was going to be hard for that child to receive foster care services if they hadn't already been in the foster care system. There's been a sea change of understanding around the commercial sex industry as it affects children. And so I'm happy to say that for a few years, there has been training for, formerly called DIFAS, now Division of Child Protection and Permanency, where they understand the signs and symptoms of trafficking, and they're making sure there are resources. And they're saying, oh my goodness, we will not release this child to the trafficker. We're going to make sure that they get into a safe environment. And then just today, I was at a foster care meeting, and someone from CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, met with me afterwards, and she said that there is a subcommittee working with Division of Child Protection and Permanency, Court Appointed Special Advocates, which works at oversight of foster care. Also Polaris Project, which works specifically with human trafficking victims, and Homeland Security's Victim Services Specialist out of, they've got a Newark office and another South Jersey office, as well as FBI's Victim Service Specialist. They're getting together to say what's the most holistic protocol to give these survivors the best chance, acknowledging, as Max said, that they have different needs than a foster child that were perhaps the parent was so stressed that unfortunately they hit the child. Or a parent was working 3 jobs and the child was left home alone, and that's neglect. They're understanding more about the victimology. So there are great things happening in New Jersey, but continued strides need to happen.
This is a different question, but I was wondering, is there an incentive for the victims to turn on their traffickers? Because some of the things that you're describing is that they're really severely dependent upon them, but is there a program in place to give them an incentive to turn them in? And so you can actually get, it seems to me that one of the problems is you have to get the person get the bad guy, and the bad guy in this scene is the trafficker.
I mean, from what I've seen so far, it's generally, I don't know if there's an incentive for the victim, except.
Could I speak to some of that? Now, again, the education needs to be done, right? But once a victim has been rescued, Homeland Security and the FBI assures that first off, that there's, if they are not of U.S. citizen, that there's a special visa, so that they're not sent back, right? That there's job training, there's language skills, there are all kinds of services, and especially safe houses and real safe and real safe places, so that
Intimidation, it's so frightening.
and exactly. So that's where, like Homeland Security is not going to tell you where their, people are landing, right? But they're landing in safe places, right? That kind of thing.
Besides the SOAP project, is any group looking into putting a sign in the bathrooms and the rest stops, in the men and women's bathrooms and the rest stops? Something that could be adhered to the mirrors that also give like the coalition number or something?
The coalition is investigating that. There's so many things going on right now with the coalition. There are some states that already have that. New Jersey, with the revamping of the Attorney General's task force, there's a state hotline number and the national hotline number, the 888-3737-888, which gets funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So it's deciding what's going to work best for the victims, and also deciding when it can be there. Maybe it's even a co-branding between human trafficking hotlines and child abuse hotlines, because sometimes there is the overlap. But that's in the works.
And Patricia, what about the billboard signs that Polaris wanted to work on?
Yes, the Attorney General's office has a number of initiatives in addition to what you spoke about with the train the trainers. They're going to do, I believe it's 9 student assemblies for middle and high school students in January. There's a really vibrant 3D experience to talk about the vulnerabilities and to be aware. And again, it's sort of, it reaches to their value of technology, to flashing lights, things happening. So they're really excited about reaching thousands of students. Also, the Attorney General's office has money to have billboards. Right now, there's one at the Meadowlands. And there are going to be other awareness raising events through the Attorney General's office. So they're doing a lot. And the Polaris Project in Newark, at one point they were going to be given a billboard from Verizon. And I'm not sure where that is in the negotiation and where it would be. But so there's a lot going on.
How much, I'm not sure if this is directed to you guys, but how much direct field work would you say is being conducted right now background supportive work such as raising awareness, informing education, things like that? And do you think that this is a good balance for now, or that needs to be shifting, or anything like that?
Well, no, where's the balance between direct outreach to basically what the prosecutor was talking about versus the... Well, listen, having just worked on this for a number of years, I can tell you that up until a year ago, it was very skewed. It was just about awareness. When I hear you talking and hear what you're learning, what you're achieving, honestly, it gives me goosebumps, because this is really going to start to change the tide. Yes, it's definitely getting to the right balance, but it's exciting, and it's a wonderful thing that's going on here, and that prosecutors like you are really willing to sort of learn it and put it into action. So it's getting there. It was skewed, but I think awareness is also critically important, because it means that we will demand these things happen. So
I think the important thing to understand is about the victim identification. Like you were talking about earlier about seeing the guy at the gas station with the bed and just not being really, the police officer himself wasn't sure what was going on. And so that's why, yeah, it is still skewed, but that's just because people have to learn to identify these victims, and then we'll be able to find them and help them.
Yes.
I'm just a part of a urban summit that is interested in raising awareness about
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry. And we were looking to have summit and maybe some of the neighboring communities proclaim on January 11th, the Human Trafficking Day in New Jersey. And I was just curious, what are some maybe activities or events in other towns?
are you free tomorrow?
From 9:30 until
Have you got anyone in what's your group?
We're in Half the Sky Summit.
Okay.
So I'm too young to learn.
Well, I was going to say, but that is, if you're interested, make sure you just connect with the coalition, because, and you can get the proclamation done right away. And
Yeah, I saw it on the website.
yeah, go ahead and just email the coalition, and you'll be able to get connected so that you can take ownership of whichever towns you want to do, and then find out what you can do in Summit. But just connect, communicate, and we'll work with you, because it'll be amazing to do that.
Kate, where in Whippany is it?
Whippany, it's Route 10. If anyone is familiar with Route 10, I live around here, and I just drive straight up the 287, come in on Route 10, going then east. And it's the Jewish Centre, but if you've ever seen the sign for Gold's Gym, you would turn in there. But go up 287, Route 10 east, and then it's right on that road. It's 901. But look out for Gold's Gym. Come in. It's the first building, the first parking lot, and then there'll be lots of people there. So
What's the street?
901
Route 10.
901 is that Franklin? And with the proclamations, it's very easy, because once you email the coalition, they send you the templates. So all you need to do is email the council, the township manager, get it into motion, and then hopefully it'll happen.
And the League of Municipalities, this is all about the snowball effect. They just issued a letter indicating that they want to see more townships issuing proclamations. Now, if you get involved with the New Jersey Coalition's proclamation initiative, we want to take it one step further, because I saw the letter and they were saying the mayor of Elizabeth was issuing a proclamation for January 11th, 2014 as Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Our template speaks to every January 11th, and so we definitely can use more volunteers getting involved in the proclamation effort, and information's at njhumantrafficking.org. And because you can make a difference in as little as 5 minutes. There's a flyer back there that speaks about, in 5 minutes, you can give an ECPAT USA postcard to Delta Airlines. And at Delta you say, please pass this up to your chain of command. I know you signed the Tourism Code of Conduct, and I appreciate that you are working for social justice. If you fly United, you hand it to them and you say, I'd really like for you to investigate signing the Tourism Code of Conduct. I know you already do training, but this is another level. And so you can do that in 5 minutes. There's a breakdown on the sheet of what you can do in 5 minutes, what you can do with an hour. if you have an amazing skill set, an amazing skill set could be that you can teach photography. You can partner with Polaris Project and work directly with survivors, because in addition to life skills, some of the survivors never had their childhood or teen years. So maybe they're 22 years old, but they didn't get the benefit of going to a museum or a show or the zoo. So there could be opportunities like that for you as well.
This is the postcard, and you can take this to the hotels when you travel. When I travel, I take these, and I do my little spiel, and I say, do you know about blah, 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 and then this has a little list, or have you know, taken the pledge, so these are really good to take with you. We're going to take, did you have a question, or was that part of the?
With the ECPAC, is that nationwide?
We're an international organization. We're an affiliate of an international network, I should say. We're based out of Brooklyn. We have someone who works for us in DC, but we cover the entire nation and work with other affiliates in the network in dealing with it internationally.
So if we have friends and family around the country, we could write to them and say, go online. What website should they look for?
ecpatusa.org. I have a bunch of literature and stuff in the back that's free for people to take.
Well, we'll take the last two questions, I guess, and then we're wrapping up. Go ahead.
Also, your experiences or findings, whatever there's, has there been any human trafficking reported for boys or young men or anything like that? And so, what would you say, you know, generally the percentages could be, or the emphasis, tackling those issues, stuff like that?
Well, there was a case just a few months ago. What was that? Is it
Ventnor, I think.
in Ventnor? Yeah, so that was just down South Atlantic City. It's definitely, I mean, in fact, some of the stats say that the girls, Patricia mentioned, the average age of girls who are dragged into this industry is 12 to 14. Boys, it's actually younger. So it's certainly a huge issue, and they should, and also the you know, transgender youth, that's a huge issue as well. So no, it's not just a girls and women issue. Typically that's a slightly larger percentage, but certainly men and boys are vulnerable too.
Yeah, there's actually in the back a booklet from IPAT about boys, and that there was a recent John Jay study a few years ago of New York City, and they found almost 4,000 sexually exploited youth commercially, and about half of them were boys.
So it's pretty much just...
Yeah. All right, so we're good. Thank you so much for